Nervous.
And here we go. We're live. Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Eliana Israel. I am a director. I'm also the. Here we go. Exactly. So this is our first panel for the Juneteenth Cinema Celebration of 2021. This is the first annual, which means we had the inaugural last summer. We're doing it again, which is fantastic. I'm very excited. Um, So I'm not going to do too much for the introduction, but I do want to first publicly thank Robin. So doing this cinema celebration has been a dream of mine since 2014, the first year I volunteered at Sundance. And I love cinema so much, and I wanted that specifically for a Black American film. So, and like one thing about me, I just am always overcome with all this admiration for all the people that came before us and all the living that had to happen. And especially, like we're carrying around all these incredible people within us, and we have a cinematic record that they've left of these lives that we've lived and the ways that we've lived. And I just wanted to celebrate that. I thought it would be really, and we've done Juneteenth for my whole life. I live in Chicago, and Chicago's always been a big sort of cultural city. So we've always done stuff like that. But as a cinema lover, I was like, you know what I need? I need to combine these two things. And here we are. So yes. If it wasn't for Robin, I'm not sure. I don't think it would have happened this year because, to be honest, like I just have been in the pandemic, the crawling side of myself, and can't get anything done that's not absolutely necessary. But Robin, for months, has just been like pushing me, moving it, making it happen. And so I just have to tell everybody how amazing she is and how thankful I am that she has like pushed this to happen. So outside of that, we've got wonderful guest panelists for the critical circle. And I'm going to go around, introduce everybody, and I'm going to ask you to say a little bit about yourself. And I am going to ask you to tell us who your favorite character is from The Wiz. So we have Nicole, who is an entertainment writer. We have Joelle, who's also Joelle is a arts and entertainment writer, producer, and The Wiz enthusiast. And we have Kyle, who is counsel for Netflix. My favorite character from The Wiz is actually Eveline. And I think it's when I was a kid, I just always liked that section of the movie. I don't think it quite occurred to me how awful she was. But now as an adult, I think she's one of the better performances in the film. I think that Mabel Coon knocked it out the park, and like she resonates with me as a viewer. And she goes up for her sister, which I appreciate as a person, my sister. So Nicole, tell us about yourself and who your favorite character is.
Like you said, I'm Nicole. And I'm an entertainment writer and like reviewer. And actually my answer is the same as yours. We just did the screening and I was like, everything Eveline is saying, I vibe with 100%. It's really just the slavery that I have an issue with. But like, if we can fix that. We can, hire them, pay them wages, and then everything else is like, I feel like it's fine. Like, no, literally, it's like a really great performance, and just like the full energy, like it's like the energy like picks up right there. You just like, yes, go ahead, yes, and so yeah, I agree. That I think my favorite character, having just watched it as an adult, with like in HD, and I'm like, oh wow, this is
she's great. Well, yeah, she's amazing. So what about you?
Hey, as you said, I'm a host, a writer, a producer. I do a little bit of everything. My favorite character is probably Glinda, just because she's played by Lena Horne and the classic goddess sensation. I'm a huge like old school movie head. I love like turn of the century 1920s through 1960s kinds of films. And so to see Lena Horne here after really doing battle with Hollywood, this is post her Broadway sensation, which relaunched her career in I want to say her late 50s. She sounds like everyone's grandma, and she gives a whole testimonial at the end of this film that just sends you off into the world and out of the theater in such like an uplifted, happy sort of headspace. She's just grand. I love Glinda.
Awesome. I mean, obviously. And then Kyle, please.
Yes, I am Kyle Alex Brett. I'm counsel at Netflix. I also tweet way too much. I probably should stop tweeting so much.
No, the best film threads.
I appreciate you. I talk a lot about film on Twitter. I feel damn. I mean, I love Evelyn and Glinda. I feel like they're fantastic. Is it cliche if I say Scarecrow, Michael Jackson?
Not at all.
I was watching. So I watched it last night in preparation, and I'm like really blown away that like he pulled that off, and like he was like all in it. He can act. Like I don't really know of many like star performers who can like really act at that level. And so I was just watching him like, damn, this is Michael Jackson. Like this is amazing. And then I'll say like just a bonus thing. The subway peddler is like the person of my nightmares. Like just absolutely horrific and just really disturbing in a way that I like. Whenever someone says The Wiz, I eventually think of Michael Jackson, but I always think of that subway scene. And I'm like, God, that shit was so scary. So yeah, that's what I think of.
That's very interesting. Actually, I meant to kind of read off some of the facts of the film because this is the Critic Circle. So this conversation will we will center on some of the more technical aspects of the film. We will talk about the impact, but I do want to really get into the production, the direction, all of those things. So The Wiz was released October 24th, 1978. It was produced by Rob Cohen from Motown Productions, and then it was written by Joel Schumacher, directed by Sidney Lumet. It was filmed in Queens, New York. So those are just a little bit of background stuff. So I have to say this, at the time of its production, The Wiz was the most expensive film musical ever made. It had a budget of $24 million. And it is also widely regarded as a film that ended the Hollywood blaxploitation film era because it was such a flop. It was the end of major investment into Black presence in mainstream filmmaking until the emergence of like John Singleton and Spike Lee and that whole cohort of filmmakers. But the film's commercial success is the biggest reason why, the reason people say it was such a failure is because A, they say it's not good, and then B, because nobody wanted to see Diana Ross playing a little girl. But yet, it is a classic film in so many Black households, so I want to get to the bottom. Is The Wiz a good film or not? Yes or no?
It's a classic film.
I was thrown. I was like, wait, do people think it's not a good film?
No. Here's the thing. I come from a place where, to me, there's like I have the ability to put aside, like I can tear something down and like break it down to. But if I enjoy it, or if it's like if it makes me happy to watch, even if I'm like watching it, like look at this, oh my goodness, look at that. But I'm still enjoying myself. I think the film did its job, right? So like, is it a technical marvel? Probably not, but every time I watch it, I enjoy it. There are movies that are beautiful that I never want to see again. I don't need to watch that ever again. Like, that was great. That was beautiful to watch. I'm never going to watch that again. I'm not going to remember anything about this. Whereas that, there are like parts that stick in your mind. Like, you don't even realize you remember till somebody brings it up. You're like, you might just say Subway. Somebody just be like, that scene, like, I live in LA, okay? So we didn't have Subways my whole life. The Subway came like when I was a child. So my two frameworks for Subways were The Wiz and the movie Volcano. So when I tell you I was not about to ride the subway, I was not about to ride the subway because these columns go start attacking me. It's going to be lava. No, we're not doing it. And it took me like years after the red line like opened up for me to like take the subway. Like, I was a child. I'm like, I'm not getting on this. So yeah, to me, I think it's like good is relative to me. And for me, I can put away my like analytical hat and just be like, I sat here and I enjoyed this. So to me, yes, it's good. But like, yeah, is it like we can tear it down all day? Like, but why would you if you enjoy it so much? You know what I mean? Like, just why would you? Like, just let it happen.
I'd say Sidney Lumet has never made a bad movie. All of his movies may not be great, but he's never made a bad movie. Like, he wrote the definitive book on how to make movies. It's called Making Movies by Sidney Lumet. I highly recommend it. I've read it several times. It's brilliant. If you're looking at like, as far as like the standard like Hollywood musical, it's up there, man. As far as presentation, overall performances, Diana aside, grand. Like everybody shows up and shows out and looks beautiful. Has there ever been a fashion scene as great as when they get to Oz and they're just walking around and strutting in their clothes? Like, I think the women maybe comes close, but maybe you could look at Clueless and Cher's giant closet just as far as like form function, you know, not necessarily specifically style, but like, what does this tell us about the characters and about the place? And what is this revealing to us about this world? There's so many like great moments in this film, but I think it's short of being a great film because Diana Ross is in the lead. She's just not bringing it the way everybody else is. That's no shade on Diana, but girl, this wasn't it for you. This was not your role. You shouldn't have been here. You look all your 34 years of age. Bless. I'm right there with you. I don't think she gives us the emotional range in vocal performances that everybody else is giving. So to me, because you don't have a great lead, it's hard to make the whole thing a great movie, but it is a classic.
It is a classic.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. I mean, I feel like the production design of this film alone is just like every time I watch it, I'm just like, damn, like these sets, like they're just, I mean, you're talking about any of Eveline's dance pieces, but you know, when they're collecting the gang and like, well, like I'm specifically thinking about when they go and they break Lion out of the little stone thing. I'm just like blown away by the look of the film. I mean, I think I don't want to compare The Wizard of Oz and I'm sorry, The Wiz and Wizard of Oz, but I do think what Judy Garland gave was like young, sweet, you know, and I think that is missing from Diana's performance. But I'm not mad at like Diana. I'm like, oh, maybe it's just because like I went into the film and you're just like, okay, it is Diana, you know? Like I never even thought it was someone else, but like I understand what people are like longing for in that role. And so, you know, to even Diana included, I'm still like, I mess heavily with this film. Like,
yeah. The funny thing is my mom grew up like in the Black Power and Black Arts movement. So that's all that I grew up with was the stuff that came out in the 60s and 70s and all this Black art. So I saw the Wizard of Oz 2 years ago for the first time. So I know, I'm telling you, like I grew up with the Wiz and I didn't even know she was supposed to be a kid. I was just like, oh, like, fucking on. I had no idea she was meant to be like a child. So it never bothered me because I didn't have that context. But I actually kind of feel this. I just want to say that I think it's a terrible script. Really, it's an awful script, and I think that the direction is top notch. I think it's a really good film because it's not easy as a director to make a good film from a bad script, and I think that so for that alone, like because I think that again, you talk about the like when you look at the direction of the film, I think that Sidney, as you say, he can't make a bad movie, and I think like in the hands of someone else, this could have been a disaster.
Yeah, I also just love the tone of the film.
Mm-hmm.
The tone of the film is just so like it's very like, you know, again, The Wizard of Oz just kind of has this very like sweet and innocent tone, and The Wiz does something different. Like it's still a little bit, you know, fantastical, but it's also very scary. And I don't know if it's like the city setting of it or what it is, but like it scares me. Even when I watched it last night, I was like, this is kind of a scary movie. Like,
yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the subway scene. Like, you know, when they first come into Munchkinland and they're like coming off the walls, and or when they go rescue Tin Man and like women like they open their eyes. It's like, whoa, what is happening here? You know?
No, it's definitely like we again just watched it. I'm like, I now because like my childhood memory of it is so scary, and I thought I was just like my childhood exaggeration memory. And I'm like, every time I watched it as an adult, it's kind of been like halfway. So I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, it's literally just kind of actually a like slightly, it's like a scary movie. It's definitely like there's more, it's more dark and more kind of like gritty than you would, I think, associate with the property, right? Which I kind of love about it. I think that's like the thing that stands out to me, because every time something, I'm like, this is taken out of this context would be an entirely different scene. Like even like you say, when they first go to Munchkin Land, they're coming out the walls, and I'm like, oh my god, what is this? Like the terror coming up, they coming to get their people. Like they got their scissors. Like it also made me think of like all the little horror things that like I don't know people were necessarily inspired by the Wiz, but like the fact that they employed those similar kind of tropes and like just I'm like, wow, this actually inspired probably a good amount of horror people like subconsciously, because it's pretty creepy and it's pretty scary, which is kind of makes it really like more fun than I even realized. When I was a kid, I was actually actively scared of a lot of it. So I'm like, oh, time to go get the popcorn. Okay.
Well, like shout out to production design for really selling the city as fantasy-scape, which I think is really a challenge to do. I mean, even if you look at now, like a lot of Marvel films will be like, we'll just go to Asian cities and there, neon lights, it's the future, crazy. I think really like conveying a, you know, what looked to me to be just like a garage, setting up some lights and then really focusing on how they're going to set that camera down. You're transported like very quickly. And it's interesting to circle back to, you know, an earlier comment about this being the end of the blaxploitation films. And, you know, 1978, by this time you already have like Disco is Dead movement is about to like hit full force. There's a lot of things happening societally where the idea of Black liberation has become on a like white pop culture level very distasteful. Like they're just not into it anymore. It was scary in the 60s and the 70s. There was too much equity as the economy was coming down. And a lot of fear brewed out of that. And then pretty quickly as we step into the 80s, you see like a need for Black people to either have to hardcore assimilate, you know, especially if you're looking at corporate workspaces, or like, you know, we have the beginnings of rap sort of music coming out and becoming very much like, okay, well, this is our corner and we're just not going to meet in the middle anytime. We became a very like, I think even more in the 80s, we saw like an exaggerated bisection of Black and white in America. And I think it's, to me, truly not fair to lay that on the Wiz as being like, oh, it was a flop. Like, yeah, it was a flop, but I don't think it had anything to do. I don't think corporations would have been like, oh, well, this is still extremely financially successful. And so we should continue to invest in these films and movies. And, you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to lay this all at the Wiz's feet and be like, well, that's why we didn't have nice things. So you could see all $24 million up on that screen. Like, this is not a movie that was mismanaging its funds. Like, this is a $24 million picture. So yeah.
No, I completely agree. And I think part of the issue is like, you know, Hollywood in general has to like teach people what to look for and what to expect, you know? And it's like, we're still trying, I can say that we're still in a place of like trying to get people to, like, still in 2021, trying to get people to appreciate Black musicals. And so like something like Jingle Jangle, which I loved, and I thought it was like so great, it still took a really hard time to get people to watch it and to get people who watched it loved it, but it's like there's still, you know, room to go in getting that widespread appeal. And so, you know, the fact that it was the Wiz was not a commercial success back then, it's like, yeah, that's not surprising to me. Like we need a few at bats to get people accustomed to seeing this type of stuff. So yeah, I don't fault it at all.
I wonder if you think that, because I had the thought while watching it that this is an extremely Black thing in a way that not all, like, watching, I'm like, this is such a specific kind of Black. If I'm a white reviewer or if I'm a white, like, critic, you know, and I'm writing up, you know, back in the day, it's like, what, 5 papers or whatever. Like, it's not a lot of people getting access to this. And the first people that are going to see it are probably white critics. Can you imagine what they're writing? Like, what are they talking about? Playing numbers. It's like the Crows whole section is like, you know, like we talk like that at our family reunions, you know. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm like, it's so Black that I can imagine that barrier for entry for white people was so hard. And then you have those gatekeepers and like the critics are like, this is incomprehensible. Like, it's a whole different story to them, right? So do we think that, like, just the fact that it's so specifically Black, that actually is because there are things that are Black, but they're very universal, and it just happen to be Black people, where there are things that like this that are like extremely Black in terms of just the writing, the way that people move, the way they talk. Do we think that was like, I feel like that might have been more of an issue than all of the other kind of like things that coalesced?
There was that recently unearthed Baldwin interview that came out, and people were, I guess the execs that had it were saying like they didn't think there was anything newsworthy in it for so long, and it's like, what are you talking about? Who are you talking to? That, I mean, I completely agree that sometimes like certain things are for certain people, and like the Wiz speaks to a certain it's not like global. It's not global.
It's not.
It's a very specific film. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, same. It's not a global film at all. So okay, I was gonna get into this later, and you guys will have to forgive me. There's a few quotes I'm gonna read to open up to continue this line of conversation. But so Ray Bolger, he played the Scarecrow in the 1939 film. And he was quoted at one time as saying, "The Wiz is overblown, will never have the universal appeal that the classic MGM musical has obtained." And then there was a journalist who wrote a book, Mr. and Mrs. Hollywood, and she says that the script was too scary for children and too silly for adults. And that critique specifically really struck me as this observation of like sort of an unconscious understanding of Black American families. It's a script written for people who are innately prepared for a harder and more horrific reality starting at a younger age, while also being not being astute enough to determine intelligence. And then I also felt like that critique suggests a lack of whimsy on the part of Black adults. But I think my question is, if The Wiz had been made with anybody Black on the key creative team, a writer, director, or producer, who were all white Jewish men, do you think it would have struck a more subtle balance as a family film? Would it have been less scary for children? Would it have been more interesting for adults? And kind of to your point, Kyle, like, is there a lack of whimsy when it comes to Black audiences? Overall, Black American audiences?
That's a lot of question, girl. I'm gonna try to break it down in parts. No, it's a great question. It's built on a lot. It's hard to say for the first portion of like, would it have been different with? I mean, it would have definitely been different if there were Black people at the helm of it. Is our lived experiences, right? But there's something astute about it that makes me feel like there was a lot of Black input. Like Sidney Lumet, no dummy, right? He's a man of the world, cultured, educated, like connects with people is what I'm really trying to say about him. Like I feel like understood the assignment. But I do, and I can't pull from my brain any working Black directors who would have been a good fit for a musical at the time, right? Mm-hmm. So there were working Black directors, but who would I have assigned any of them to direct this musical about a young girl trying to step into adulthood? Not that I can think of, and because of that, I guess we just won't ever know truly what would have been, what could have been, right, if we had been allowed. But I also don't think we could have gotten $24 million if you had even one Black person at the helm of the project at that time. So that's all a struggle of history. But as far as the lack of whimsy, I don't think so. I think when our whimsy comes in, people don't understand it. I'll point to Ava's A Wrinkle in Time, which I know affected a lot of Black women powerfully, where they're like, oh my God, my childhood. And it's not ever directly telling you anything. And it's not really trying to be universal. It's very much like, this is for Black girls. And if you're not about that life, then it's not a film for you. And that's okay, which is a huge gamble for Ava to take. It really struck me personally. I think that there's a lot of, and then, we don't even have time to go into all the like great indies that Blacks are making.
No.
It's just, there's too much film, but I don't think that I don't think we lack it. I think perhaps our whimsy is not always recognized as universal whimsy, right? But in the same way that I think, if you were to look at Korean films that don't hit big here, right, where there's magical elements involved that people are just like, I don't understand what this means or why it's happening, and so I can't connect to it. But for an entire culture, that's like their childhood stories, and it's the things that have defined their youth to their adulthood. So I think that there's no lack on our part. I think maybe we don't always have access to the kinds of funds that would allow us to do it on a universal scale, right? It's a lot of times it's just made for us and we just get to enjoy it, which, I also don't necessarily see as a bad thing all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that our whimsy is like, look at a music video, look at like Busta Rhymes, Missy Elliott. That's whimsy, right? But we don't think of, we're just like, oh, this is, but like, we have the imagination and we love, those are the things that like, I look back at like some of those videos and I'm like, this was like so 3000, like it's still futuristic and it's still like something that it's hard to imagine, and it happened in the 90s, like, right? So we clearly have the capacity for it and we clearly enjoy it and love it. Those things stick with us. It's just that like the disconnect between like what I think people think we want to see versus what we actually want to see. So when we create things for ourselves, people can't recognize it as whimsy, or they can't recognize what it is because it's not their idea of what they think we think whimsy is. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think like if I think Black people were definitely involved. It just feels very informed in a way that stuff tends not to, when you can tell when it's like, you have not a single Black friend. But I definitely think that like, if Black people are at the helm, there are just things that like a white director or a white writer, just people are not necessarily going to pick up on and have like the conscious thought to include, whereas for us it's not even a thought because it's our experience, right? So those things have to be kind of excavated. Like white people have to ask about that, or they have to like find out about that in a way. But yeah, we obviously like whimsy. I think like all the creative stuff that we do that's outside of them, like Hollywood, like even again music videos, like TikTok, like look at like stuff that kids are doing on TikTok, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like the creativity, the whimsy, the ability to see things that are just like slightly, offbeat and like just fun and cool. We have the ability and we have the desire to see it. We just don't necessarily always get the chance to, because they like, oh, they don't know what they want, let's do it for them. Let me, they'll like this. And I think it's more like giving us the reins to like show y'all our real like ability to like be crazy. Because we are, like you said, a lot of the indie work and a lot of like even anime and manga that's being created by Black people is like insane now. And like, yeah, give us the budget. And I promise you, we'll show you that like we love whimsy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think sometimes whimsy gets coded, like in a way that you may not necessarily peep, where it's like it's been coded in this very white centric way. But there's you go to any hood, you go to any cookout, you go to any country town, and people are doing incredibly whimsical things that are truly like definitionally whimsy. Like I was watching this street photography documentary, and these children it was like in this abandoned parking lot, but they were jumping on this mattress, and they were like pretending to be all these like superheroes, and they were jumping on this mattress. I'm like, that's whimsical, like for us, that's a type of whimsy. And so I do think the Wiz fits that, like it, like how bold of it to be like, yo, we're not going to Kansas. We're talking about Harlem, and we're talking about making it fantastical. And that is how I think that's the type of Black whimsy I'm familiar with. So I definitely think it was whimsical. It just maybe, and to Joel's point, like if a ton of Black women are telling you, I really mess with A Wrinkle in Time, and you're denigrating it or dunking on it, it's like maybe you're just missing something, And I think if every Black folk I know is like, I love the Wiz.
Love it.
And if you're like, if you don't, I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Mm-hmm. But if you're like, as a categorically, this film is like terrible, I don't know, maybe you just might be missing something. And that's what I would have said if I had a voice to those critics back then. I'd have been like, every black person I know loves this film. So like, you either think they're lying about something, or you as an individual might just be missing something.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I'd say.
I think I would say the same. Yeah, I actually, even when Dorothy first lands in Munchkin Town, when they're coming up, I've always thought the graffiti was a bit whimsical. Just when you look at the colors and how that whole thing comes together. And so yes, it's dark, but again, I think he was leaning. First of all, I didn't ask Sydney about this, so this is just speculation. The last time we talked, it didn't come up. But I do kind of feel like he was leaning into an urban whimsy throughout the film, and it shows, and that read for me. But when I was reading some of the specific comments, I was just like, oh, this is really interesting how this other reading of the film, So, okay, we kind of touched on it, but I would like to hear for you guys cinematically, what would you say are the strongest elements of the film? What are the weakest elements of the film? And obviously, we're not going to say the music because that's obvious.
The production design truly blows me away.
Mm-hmm.
There's this film called The Cook. Oh my God, I always mess this up. The Cook, the Thief, it's like something like The Cook, the Thief, his wife, her lover, right? But it has, its production design too is dark, and it's red, and it's greens, and it's just very like kind of borderline horrific. And I don't know, anytime I watch The Wiz, I'm always just like truly blown away by the scale and the scope of it. Like I think that Sydney really wanted to showcase this because there's so many really long, like extreme long shots where it like, when Diana and Michael, when they're walking down the Yellow Brick Road, it's like extremely far. And I feel like, in most films you would just see like close-ups and they'd be doing like dances around each other or whatever. But, Sydney is like, in his DP, it's like these extreme long shots. And to me, I think Sydney was like trying to showcase the production design of this entire world. And I bought into it. Like, I love all of those really far shots when everyone seems like extremely small. And I thought the production design was just grand and awesome.
Now I've had a thought of like, if you think about where the movie musical was at this time, like it's dead. Like as a door, like no one is making musicals. And so the idea of this almost being like a too early return to the great like MGM style musicals, I wonder if this had come out in like 84, 87, like 10 years later, what the impact might have been on, cinematic audiences at the time, just because they might have been more hungry for it. I think there was definitely something about it popping up at this time that it was just, oh man, I really feel like they were fighting an uphill battle. But to your question, to me, it's probably the costumes do such a good job of selling it. I mean, they are on some large sound stages, and for us to read these costumes from like 60 feet back from the camera as people are dancing up to it, and then a costume being able to read at a distance and up close, it's imperative to really selling a character for us. And it feels less like a stage. There's something different about a stage production costume and a film costume, and I think they nailed a space between those two really well. Like it works on camera. Everything is lovely. I mean, Lena Horne in the crystals in the sky with the hanging babies next to her, gorgeous. I love Eveline's costume, and the way it swings and moves, like it really allows her to be like extra large and just like angry. And like you would think a dress, when you do mean ladies, they're either in like very nun costumes or anything that's considered like matronly. She's in these bright fun colors in a triangle style like swing dress. So again, that to me is whimsical. That's like very playful for your evil witch character. She isn't so dark and scary. She's loud and in your face and mean, and that's completely different from our understanding of an atypical witch, or just to be like fair about it, the type of witches we see in white culture. And I think that that's really intriguing to me, the way that they just very much lean into the like color and fun and space, and like it just all feels very alive with individuality and personhood, which, you know, I don't know what the cast size was on this, but there had to be at least like 4 dozen dancers at one point. So to just all of those people, make them look unique, distinct, part of a culture, you know, that's a lot of work, and it was brilliantly done.
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz sequence, when we're changing from the green to the red to the gold, that whole sequence with the costuming, even as a kid without any concept of like what was going on, I was like, I want to do all of this. It felt, and like watching it now, it feels like, yes, this is costume for the stage, but it feels like a real world there, like fashion matters. And it was, and it felt very Black. It felt like the people that walk around being extra. Like it was culturally specific, especially for me, like growing up in the city. I wasn't in New York, but it felt very real, but still for the film, like you said.
Yeah,
I think it's not been a Fashion Week thing yet.
Yes. We know why. It is what ism. No, so my answer is actually kind of basically the blend of those answers, which is that I feel like it's an ambiance. Like I feel like as soon as it cuts on, you know where you are, you know these people, you know this vibe, like you get it. As soon as they go in the eyes and they all slinking around, you like, yes, mamas, go ahead. Like you know, like you have had that experience. Like every set is like, even if you don't live in a city, or even like you just have a visual and like a visceral reaction to it, because you like, yeah, I know what this space is. So it's a mix of those things. It's like the production design. There are parts when the camera is like up in the rafters and there's dancers up there, and I'm like, why are y'all up in the rafters? Like, I know, because I'm watching it like again, like I don't think I watched it. They're like, I don't know if they remastered it or maybe because my TV, I got a newer TV, but it was just so crisp. I'm like, oh, they got dancers up in the rafters. But what I mean is like, no matter where the camera goes, there's something, like there's a detail, and there's like a really, it just, there's nothing missed. Like I feel like you could put on like VR goggles and turn around and that whole thing is going to be full. There's never going to be like a missed spot. So it was like the production design was on point, and then the costuming was like, there are people, like I can imagine specific people right now, like, you know, dancer number 33 or whatever, but like visually, I know exactly what this person is wearing. I could probably be like, I want this. I could describe these outfits because they were so concise and so like specific, and like all of them look different. Like they literally all look different to the point where you could describe the outfit and the person could be like, I know which one you're talking about, because they were not like two people that were dressed identical. And I'm like, y'all have like 40 dancers, okay? And like all of them have different outfits, different hair, different, like that's wild to me. But yeah, so it's just that whole, like I feel like you can step into that world. It feels like a world that you can walk into, and it is fully inhabited. There doesn't feel like there's a point where like if you turn the camera, you just gonna see nothing. It's like they like, no, we got all this covered. Don't you worry about it. And that's what I think is the most successful thing. Like it definitely feels like its own living, breathing like world.
Yeah.
I liked the performances too. I'd add in there. Yeah, everyone. So I saw someone earlier say that Diana wasn't giving anything at all. And I was like, damn, like, come on. She gave a little.
She was giving minimal. Let's say not nothing, but not much.
Listen. I want to go back to, was it you? I'm sorry. Who said that the script was not good?
Eliana.
Okay, Eliana. So I'm thinking back, right? And I'm like, okay, well, it's based off the classic adaptation, and you know, but then what's wrong with Diana's performance is what's also wrong with the script, and the 2-for-2 whammy really kills, and there's not any subtext.
Yep. Exactly.
Diana is a crying mess the whole film. She's just constantly like, oh my God, oh God. It's just a constant state of tears, but without being rooted in anything, right? She doesn't tap into the actual fear, right? She doesn't tap into the fear of going out into the world. And because she can't tap into that and show us in these, you know, she gets some great close-ups, but they're all one note. There's never a change where you're like, oh, she's learning, or like even by the end of the film, you don't feel like, oh my God, she's grown into a woman. Like I feel like she can take these high schoolers on now. You should stay in kindergarten, girl, because that's where they can handle these kinds of temperaments. So it's I think that is sort of what's missing between the divide of like we have a ton of fear. We have a lot of whimsy, and it's really beautiful. But without, really watching a girl grow into a woman, like the whole point of The Wizard of Oz, it feels like it's missing and it's lacking something. So there are like Nipsey Russell's performance. Oh my God.
Oh man.
Oh my God. It's so good. It's moving. We were talking in the Discord about Richard Pryor's performance. His few little minutes in there where he just kills you as a guy who's just like, I'm just trying to make it here. No, and that small light just blew up, and that little lip tremble, someone mentioned it in the Discord, and I was like, yes, performance, stunning. Yes. But
but yeah, he was performing, meaning like I can feel like what he's feeling, as opposed to like she's saying words, and I'm like, what are we doing? What are the emotions? Like, what are we supposed to? Because like she's screaming where they're screaming, "I needed to be had." She can't keep track of this little teeny dog. Sling him on your shoulder, put him in a bag or something. Like he's this little. She has
a good horror face though.
Yeah, like she
could have been a great.
Her reactions never felt appropriate for like the moment. She does scare really well. Probably because she was scared that she had to like perform. I'm so sorry. Diana Ross, I apologize.
I just have to point out when she's talking to her aunt in the beginning, the aunt clearly says that she's 24.
Right. The aunt, like, that's the only actual like,
I know she was in her 30s. I'm just saying
motivation that they give her in the movie, which the aunt is like, you have never been past like, so we know that she don't go nowhere, but like that shouldn't be the reason we know she's scared to get out, right? Like I should feel like I don't know. It was just like she was really giving us bare minimum. But like, I mean, she played like she made everybody else, I think, like look great. I don't know how that might sound weird, but I feel like
no, it doesn't sound weird because listen, when you have somebody who's doing a mediocre job next to someone who's doing that, you're like, damn, wow, right. That is great. That's why when you catch Richard, because Richard Pryor's performance could easily miss you. Right? Yeah. Not just because of its length and time, but because it's so good. It's one of those things where you might not notice how good it is, right? Yeah. But when you got back to Diana, you're like, man, this man is acting. Lord.
No, that's honestly because I've seen the movie and that's the part I remember the most, I guess, because at the end I was like, yeah, like I don't know, my brain is weird, but like it's the first time I was just like, oh, he out here really serving us something, like he is giving us emotion. And I'm like, the only reason that would stand out is because the rest of the situation is not giving what needs to be gave. Because I feel like, but but yeah, like I do like everybody for the most part. No, I just was like, and I didn't come into it feeling, because I didn't know she was even supposed to be a child. I thought they changed the whole story just generally, and then they talk in the beginning. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if that's that's fine. Also, but yeah, no, I like Diana as I feel like she's a great personality, but everybody can't be all things to all people. So that's what I'm gonna say on that.
Copy that. Okay. Well.
Child muting.
I just want to say, Super Jinky said Diana not tapping into that childhood fear ties into Kyle's comment about the Wiz missing the innocence role that the Wizard of Oz had. Tremendous points both. But so I'm going to do two things. I'm reading another quote, but this one is from Mr. Lumet himself, the amazing, just to kind of like do this comparison and this contrast. So during production, he was quoted as saying there was nothing to be gained from the 1939 film other than to make certain we didn't use anything from it. They made a brilliant movie, and even though our concept is different, they're Kansas, we're New York. They're white, we're black. And the score and the books are totally different. We wanted to make sure that we never overlapped in any area. And he had also gone on to say that he wanted the film to be an absolutely unique experience that nobody has ever witnessed before. And so I am wondering, again, as somebody who had never seen The Wizard of Oz, so I wasn't coming into it with any context, I think that he set out what he set out to do. And I kind of wonder, now listen, I'm not saying Diana did a good performance. I don't know that as a director, I'm not sure that it would have been a struggle to direct her in the role because, as Joelle said, like the subtext is missing. When you have a script that doesn't have a lot of subtext, then with an actress who struggles to create subtext, it does feel hollow in some places. Sorry, I had a question somewhere, but I lost it. Anyway, that's what he said. He wasn't trying to make The Wizard of Oz. It was his own thing. And I think that sort of lends to that horrific feel of like, you know, being in the city. It's a different type of imaginative space. And this is about a grown woman. She's already sort of done the growth, I guess, that Dorothy did in me. I thought, first of all.
No, but she hasn't. Like, I feel like that's the whole, like, the setup is you're 24 and you're so shy and you can't talk to anybody. And you haven't left this, like, couple block radius. And you've been, people believe in you. Like, if somebody wants to give you a job that's going to give you more money with more opportunities, you know, and you can make a difference and you're not taking it. So, like, she's a latent adult, you know, she just hasn't gone out and really made her mark on the world because she's afraid. And the script doesn't do a lot of opportunities for her. You know, she stands up for the scarecrow, you know, and she's sort of just standing up for people, but there's not a lot of opportunities for her to stand up for herself. Mm-hmm. Even at the end, she's, you know, mostly just calling a guy out and then tells him to believe in himself. But like, you never really had an opportunity to believe in yourself along the way. Your challenges are all about helping other people, which is probably indicative of where we were in women's rights at the time. But there's not a lot of opportunity for her to be like a fully grown, independent person and make the changes that, you know, an audience would need to see in order to believe that there would be a significant change in her personality or in her ability to go out in the world and achieve. But I think I'm wondering were you going to ask about the differences in watching the two movies and if there was?
You know what? Actually, I wasn't, only because in the spirit of Sydney, I was like, look, if he's not using The Wizard of Oz as a reference, then I don't think we should either. You know, like,
that's very fair.
For him, he was just like, this is its own movie. It's its own thing completely. So I was like, let's rock with that.
Do we think people still, like, we know that, right? Like, he's not doing that, but I'm reading the paper or whatever, and I'm looking for something to watch. The Wiz, I'm like, this is clearly The Wizard of Oz for Black people, right? So even if you don't set out to make that movie, or that's what your intention is, like, this is completely different. How do you tell people, how do you convince people that you are making something that's not meant to be the same or like a version of, like, this is our story, this is our thing? Because I feel like if you have the Wizard of, like, I'm not a musical person, actually. I don't love musicals. All my, like, people like joke about it. Like, I watch them, but like, I have to be in a mood for musicals. So I rarely am just going, like, let's put on a musical. But like, of course, you've seen The Wizard of Oz or like have reference to it, even though like I don't remember it. It's one of those things that like I know I've seen because it's there, but like I don't have any specific memory of it. Like, it's just a thing that I know I've seen before. Mm-hmm. And so it's like one of those things that I feel like so many people have a cultural reference for that like you can't help but to compare it, even if you haven't seen either of them. Like, I feel like you would still know. And so like, how much does that play into like people's expectations and because even visually, like off the top of my head, I can see like what I think somebody might think they're gonna see if they like, oh, it's a Wizard of Oz type thing. And like The Wiz is so kind of like the opposite of that in a lot of ways. It's like much darker, much grittier, and much more like real. And like, you know, the Oz is very much like, it's like kind of an ideal type of, obviously until you get into the nitty gritty, but like it's way more like, oh, this is a cool little fun place. Whereas as soon as you're in the Wiz, it's like as soon as you're there, you like, it's Brooklyn, or you know what I mean? Like, I ain't from New York, but I'm just like, this very much feels like a neighborhood that, you know what I mean? So it's like not as, the escapism is different.
I would say this Oz is more representative of the Oz in the books as far as being dark and scary. But I think the way the original Wizard of Oz film showcases Oz, it's more of a like a poisoned apple. Like, it's beautiful to look at, but it's very dangerous underneath and seedy. And that's sort of very much the peak of fear, I think, for white folks going into a city is like, oh, maybe it's there, but underneath maybe it's like a little seedy. Whereas like this is very like, every portion is the city, right? If you think about like, she's Kansas, she's in the country, then she's going through what I guess would sort of be like a suburb or an outskirt town when she's in Munchieville, and then it's like a lot more country, and then she gets to the city, where everything is very shiny and like promises to make you over and make you new, but there are like liars and things here. Where in this tale, everyone is from the city, and the city is like a thriving culture, and there's a lot to be gained from different pockets, and you see how different people are treated in different spaces within the city. And I wonder, for folks who did come in looking to see like a quote unquote Black Wizard of Oz, there's absolutely the intro of the classic Wizard of Oz is all like, it's all subtext. It's like, here are all these people trying to make decisions for your life, you know, and then she's dreaming about them. She's trying to process what's been told to her and what she's going to do with all of that. You get a little bit of that at the tail end of this movie, when it's like the believe in yourself speech, very similar to what her mother tells her, her aunt tells her at the top of the film. But there's not a lot of like reliving the advice given by elders throughout the film. And so I think if you were looking for that structure, it could absolutely be missing for you here.
Yeah, I would just quickly echo Joel's point of the Wiz feeling like, if you read the book, like feeling like more of a piece of that. And also, if anyone's seen Return to Oz, that is like, that's also like a scary ass movie in the same way that I find The Wiz scary. But yeah, I've seen The Wizard of Oz maybe like 100 times. Like that was a movie I watched when I was a kid, literally just on loop, basically. And so I love, I feel like it's somewhat sad that Sydney like kind of dismissed The Wiz, because I love the departures he made from The Wiz. And so I don't know why, like, I would be like, yeah, here we recognize The Wiz, you know, I mean, we recognize The Wizard of Oz, and here are certain choices we made away from that.
Right.
I think that's always great and a little bit more honest, but yeah.
Yeah, to say there's nothing to be gained from The Wizard of Oz was really a trip. I'm like, there's still a lot of great things happening in that very old movie.
But I mean, I don't know. I think, and part of me feels like, but again, if you look at at his film, I think he did stand by that. I feel like he
definitely did.
Choice to be like, this is going to be its own thing. Like, I'm not dealing with that at all. And I really do feel like, unfortunately, to me, the script, there were just a lot of opportunities left on the table for the main character's growth. And like, who knows, maybe Diana would have been stronger with the arc on the page, because her arc isn't on the page, and I just don't think she had the depth as an actor to create that arc on the screen without it being on the page.
This is literally no shade. Do we think that maybe the script was maybe adapted to the performer a little bit? Like, is it possible that they had?
She wasn't even, it was another actress. It was going to be Stephanie Mills at first. But okay, speaking of, so we're running out of time. We're only going to do an hour. Okay, I have to say this, just so that you guys know, because there's been a lot of Diana talk. Without Diana, technically speaking, if Diana didn't do it, there would have been John Badman would have been directing this film, not Sidney Lumet. And then Rob Cohen would not have produced it, because Diana brought Rob Cohen on, and Rob Cohen brought Michael Jackson on. So Diana gave us Sidney and Michael. So my question is, was she worth it?
Yeah.
Diana should have been a producer. Yeah. Diana should have been executive produced by Diana Ross. Should have been the very first title card.
Diana,
there you go.
Sidney, Quincy, and Michael. We do not have them without Diana Ross.
I was going to say, she should have been an EP and then ushered in Stephanie Mills. She could have got a whole talk tour with like this girl, Stephanie Mills. She's my protege. She's got next. Love it. Because no one was going to touch Diana's circle. Like you were good, girl. You did not need this feather in your hat, and you didn't have the range. It's not any shade. It's just facts. She would have been a fabulous executive producer, because the aspects she did bring into the project were beautiful and great and definitely elevated it. Yeah. But I don't think her performance, I don't know if it was worth it. I do not know.
No.
I think the overall product was worth like we're talking about it, and like it's obviously still culturally like important, and it's something that we still like love, right? So she didn't tank it, she didn't kill it where we like, I can't even watch that, right? So it's not fair to be like, oh, she was like, we can't, it's irredeemable. But I feel like especially because we have the benefit of hindsight and like knowing that like the other people, the other things that could have been, like we have like, yeah, of course there are people that could have really made that, like, but also at the same time, like only so many Black women of a certain age. She was not supposed to be that age, but only so many Black women are marketable at that scale. And like you said, that budget, all of that stuff happens because you have a certain star attached. So you have, so it's like, yeah, we kind of do have to like take what we get because you know that so much of that is tied to the fact that she was already like well known and marketable and had connection. Whereas like, yeah, you might have had a much stronger performer, but then you get no interest. We don't get those set designs. We don't get that costuming because we don't get that budget, right? So it's like,
yeah. I'm okay with that trade-off. That trade-off, to me, the trade-off was like,
especially because the money was already set. Like Motown was spending what it was going to spend. They just wanted Stephanie Mills to do it because it was so successful on Broadway. But Diana brings Rob, the producer, who brings Michael Jackson. And then, of course, they already had a director. He left because he didn't want Diana to do it. And that's why Sidney was
he was
like,
who?
The original director said, who? Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Really quick. Musical. I do want to have everybody's favorite musical number. And then we're going to peace out. Best or favorite musical number?
My favorite is Believe in Yourself. I just think Grandma's disappeared from movies. The original Star is Born. Grandma plays a huge role in it. And then she just disappeared from every other iteration. I think grandmas are vital, important figures in everybody's life. And the fact that they aren't featured more is always devastating to me. I know Glinda the Good Witch is technically not, but Lena Horne was grandmothered every Black woman into Hollywood. She was the first. And so to hear, again, and then to solidify on screen a great moment for her, even though her whole cinematic career were basically she would come in, blow the house down for 5 minutes and then disappear from the screen. So I do wish she could have had a little bit more to do here. But what she did give us, like, timeless, absolute classic. You can just watch that moment on a loop and it's so beautiful and perfect and wonderful. And I think there's something truly magical captured in just that moment.
Okay.
The reason my answer is like you can't win only because it's like no, because it's like, and this is like I feel like you watching a movie at this point and like music has happened, right? But that's the first time you are like in a scene like yes, you show, and then it's like I don't know, it's something about that, it like turns it up for me. Like it's like as soon as that came on, I'm like in a different space. I'm like, okay, now we are in it, and I feel like that being the first kind of thing that really just like shakes me up. It's like I'm never prepared for it. It's like, oh, okay, here it's about to happen. But then it happens. You're like, oh, there it is. So for me, it's just that excitement that always happens. Like I always think like I'm gonna be over it. Like I didn't see this movie, whatever. And then like it happens, you just like, there he go, he getting it. And so for me, it's that because of just that sheer excitement of like when it happens, I'm like, okay, now we watching this movie, we in here, we dancing now. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, Nicole, I love that song exactly because of what you said. It's Michael Jackson, but also it's like it's so weird. It's a bop about how like his life sucks and like he can never.
I mean, like, I can relate though.
But you're like.
That's the Black experience. We make jokes out about poverty and just suffering all day. That's how we thrive.
That's what I'm saying. That duality of like, why is this song hitting? And it's like bad depressing. But like, I love it. I love that song so much. It's just,
can we bring honorable mentions to Don't Bring Me No Bad News? Because
that was my second. So that's my second answer. Because I'm like, also, again, as an adult, me and her, we are very close. Like we just gotta get her to be respect, right? And we can be kicking it because I honestly vibe with the whole energy. We just gotta keep, pay our work.
Human labor laws into it.
Yes, yeah, that's it. And once we get there,
I think that's why I didn't get it as a kid, that she was like a person. I was like, don't you bring me go back.
And then also like the workers are getting it. They like, don't do it. They over there twerking, they got they little buzz popping. I'm like, they having a good old time. Then you like when you actually listening, like obviously these are
it's such a vibe.
Plays, but like when you take away the context and you just visually looking at it, I'm like, they having a great time. It's what the warehouse job is looking like. I need to go get me one because they over here having them a little party.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, please, before we go, let everybody know how they can find you and more of your work online, where you are and what you're doing?
I'm on at Queer Specimen at Twitter, and it links to everything because I self promote. So definitely you can find me.
At Queer Specimen.
Yes. I'm at Joelle Monique all over the internet. Coming at JoelleMonique. I host just a ton of podcasts. So, just check the socials if you're into the whole podcasting sphere. I've got new ones coming. I'm really excited to share with the world. So it'll be fun. Check it out.
I'm at, wait, let me just reiterate. Please follow Nicole and Joelle. I don't know. I've been like literally crying. I'm gonna have to say a prayer to Diana because I don't know if her reputation will survive this. Please follow them because I've genuinely been in tears. But I'm at KYALBR because that's Kyle Alex Brett. That's just my name.
KYALBR.
Yes.
Copy that. Yeah, poor Miss Ross. Thank you so much, Miss Ross, for your work. Thank you all so much for joining this conversation. For everybody that's watching, thank you so much for being here. If you haven't seen The Wiz today or this year, you should, because it is a really wonderful film. For me, it's definitely one of the best Black musicals and best American musicals that we've ever had. All things considered. All things considered, I think it's great. So thank you everybody for being here, and we're gonna wrap it up, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Robin's got a couple.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for sticking around. This is going to be our pop culture conversation. First off, I wanted to thank Eliana, Kyle, Joelle, and Nicole for the critic circle. That was amazing and super fun and very enlightening and entertaining, as anything with those brilliant minds undoubtedly would be. I'm Robin. I'm the co-founder of Black Girls Create, and I also run our community. And we are here for the pop culture conversation. So we are going to talk about what is Black film, what makes Black film, and see if we can answer that question in a way in which we can say, okay, if a film has these elements, it is a Black film. I'm joined by Ashley Terrell. Do you want to let us know who you are and where we can find you and all that great stuff? And
hey everybody. So yeah, like she said, I'm Ashley Terrell. I also am known on the internet as Ash Lemonade. I am the creator of ashlemonade.com, which is an entertainment website, and I'm also the host of the Sweeting with Ash Lemonade podcast. It's an interview-centric platform that celebrates Black and brown women who are making an impact in the culture their way. So that's me in a nutshell.
And at Black Girls Create, we love that. We love that mission. We love what you do.
Thank you, and thank you for reaching out.
Of course, yeah, super excited that you said yes. We are going to kind of just get into it, and hopefully we will be joined by one other person. But if not, I think we can do this.
Okay.
So as you know, we started the Juneteenth Cinema Celebration with a screening of The Wiz, and the key creative team of The Wiz actually, both on stage and screen. Oh, wait, here we go.
Uh-oh. More company.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
So we just kicked off. Please let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Jordan Searles. I'm a film critic, a podcaster, and a screenwriter.
Awesome. Right. So we just screened The Wiz, and as I was saying, the key creative team on both the musical and the film actually were not Black artists. It was written by a white person, produced by a white man, and directed by a white man. The music was created by a Black man. I feel like you can tell in the bass licks and in the grooves that came from the culture. But I'm wondering, it's an all Black cast. It is a very urban, very, as Nicole said in the earlier conversation, it tells a very specific story of the Black experience. Does that matter that the key creative team was not overwhelmingly Black in terms of The Wiz being considered a Black film?
I guess it kind of depends on how you look at it. Well, because I know it's such a touchy topic even now, about we're in this renaissance where it's important for us to write our own stories because we know our experiences better than anybody else. I think it's fine that the team wasn't entirely Black. It's okay, but I think as long as they know that there's a mission at hand, that we're going to be telling the Black experience. I think it would have been nice to have Black writers on, because I think when you have Black writers in a room, they're able to mold the story in a certain way that we understand. And, The Wiz is still considered a Black film, even though the writers weren't Black. Even if you looked at a film like The Color Purple, a white man directed it as well, but it's still very much tapped into the Black experience. I think now with people like Ava DuVernay, who are really trying to get more Black creators and people of color their hands on their stories, because nobody can tell stories better than us. I mean, it's not knocking those people. You know, I still love the Wiz. I still enjoyed it. Like the viewing that we had earlier today was hilarious. Like everybody in that chat just completely enjoying the film as is. And obviously, you know, it's a cult classic. We love it. And even as a culture, we can see that there's imperfections and with the film, but it's still something that we hold near and dear. So I think it kind of depends on who looks at it, but I think the biggest thing for me is like, what is the intention when you pick up a pen and you're writing from the perspective of a culture? I think it would have been helpful if they had like a writer or two, maybe a collective of Black folks on hand to help write the story, but I still consider it a Black film at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on like what you consider to be a Black film, because you know there are films that are directed by Black people that one wouldn't consider Black films, and then there are films that are clearly made, you know, with Black people in mind and with a sense of consideration. I mean, but it depends, but it really varies depending on who's doing it. Like the 70s version of Sparkle is one of my favorite movies, and that's of course like directed by a white person, but Sparkle feels like very, very specifically Black for aesthetic reasons, and I feel the same way about The Color Purple. Much consideration is put into Black people based on how Black people are shot. Like if it's like nice and like warm and you can see the richness in the color, you can tell that someone cares. Whereas like if I watch something like American Gangster, which is a perfectly good movie, but like the skin in that movie just looks like mud, like it's shot really badly, and you can and so you can tell, like, of course, like Ridley Scott made it. And if you imagine like what if somebody like Carl Franklin had made it, or like Charles Burnett, you know, it would have looked better. But in terms of The Wiz, you know, I watched it earlier. It was actually the first time I'd watched it all the way through, somehow. And everything about it was specifically trying to speak to the Black experience. Whether or not it succeeds is like up for debate, but it did feel like it was really, really going for it. And the music really helps with that. I think that if the music hadn't been, you know, like Motown music, I don't think it would have turned out the same way. And I don't remember if I read this or if it was something that I just decided, but Sidney Lumet, who directed it, he was, for a time, married to Lena Horne's daughter. And I think that perhaps this is why not only that Lena Horne is in the film, but that he made the film in the first place. I feel like he wanted to make a Black film for some reason, like maybe out of like solidarity with like his wife and mother-in-law. That would be my guess.
I mean, we can say for sure, without Sidney Lumet, we would not have had Quincy Jones as the musical creative director and producer. Because Quincy Jones actually did not like The Wiz, the Broadway show. He liked 3 of the songs, but he felt like he owed Sidney a favor. And then from there, we get Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and Off the Wall, Bad, Thriller. So I personally am hugely impacted by this movie. And like you, Jordan, I haven't watched the movie that often. This was probably like my 3rd or 4th time seeing it all the way through. My mother loves this movie. I have a childhood fear of scarecrows and an all-time overwhelming love of Michael Jackson. And then those two things juxtaposed together.
He killed
I
it.
mean, listen, like, okay, look, let's just, okay.
Yes.
But I just couldn't wrap my brain around Michael as a scarecrow for a very long time. And now I'm like, Michael can be and could be anything he wanted to do and do it well. I think it's interesting though that you bring up The Color Purple, because for me, I don't know, and this might also be true of The Wiz in certain aspects. I don't know if we could get The Color Purple made without Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
But
I mean, at that time, definitely, yeah.
It's based on Alice Walker's work. The Oprah produced, and the production team and things were were Black, and they were very intentional about wanting to tell the story, tell, you know, The Color Purple in a way that really upheld that book. And, you know, obviously things change in adaptations and in movie making in general. Things change from the Broadway musical on stage to The Wiz on screen. But I do think that there's a practical consideration when it comes to filmmaking that you don't have very much in other art forms. Like, it's very collaborative, but it's also, you know, The Wiz cost $24 million to make.
Yeah, I can tell.
And you can see every minute, every dime of that, right? But like, those considerations really, and as we know what we know about Hollywood and gatekeeping and the setup of studios, you can't really separate those things, right? So at certain times you need the name, the prestige, the white face to get the investors and to get the distribution and the talent. But I think what you both mentioned about the intentionality of it and what are you, and also how competently you do tell the story matters, right? So what do you think about, and Eliana's just asked this question that I think goes along with it, is does the audience determine if it's a Black film or not?
I think sometimes, I mean, the best example of this is like a Goofy movie, right? Like,
that's a Black film.
We decided that it was, and it is. So, I think to some degree it does. Yeah.
What about you, Ashley?
I agree as well, especially because I think that's such a special thing about our community, whether just being the conversations we have like this conversation, like we're just having, you know, in the kitchen, on the front porch, in the barbershop, on Black Twitter. You know, Black Twitter is a thing too, which is so funny. Once we like really put our stamp of approval on it and we gush on it and we tweet about it and we share images and remix it and crack jokes about it, in essence, yeah, it does become ours, because it's, especially if we can identify with certain things and pull elements like what Jordan said. A Goofy movie is a perfect example. That's like my second favorite Disney movie after Lion King, and Black folks claim that too, because James Earl Jones and God rest her soul, Mae Sinclair, and we know they played the King and Queen in Coming to America. So, you know, we took Lion King too. We feel like that this Black element from it, we immediately identify that and we're like, oh, that's ours, hands down. Yeah. Like, for instance, not to shift gears a little bit, like when we talk about Black Twitter, have you ladies watched WandaVision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see on Twitter, Bashan? That's all I have to say. Just that moment of seeing Vision in a turtleneck with a chain, immediately the memes, smoking Newports, like it just becomes this inside joke with us.
Yeah,
and we just take it and run with it. So I do agree sometimes that our community, that we love a film so much it can become ours, you know.
I feel like that happened. I mean, I don't personally like it, but that happened with Scarface, definitely.
Oh yeah.
I'm one of those weird people that whenever anyone says Scarface, I still think of the 1940s version. I never really go. I don't know.
I've never seen that one, but the way that especially rappers took hold of that movie and just obsessed over Tony Montana, and just, I think to the point that Al Pacino was like, this is a lot. Just even he was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, and I think something that I think about a lot too is with The Wiz and with some other Black films, like Blackness is not a monolith. Like we spend so much time like explaining the like diversity and the breadth of the Black experience. But then there are times like this Sean on Black Twitter or something where you're like, no, man, but there are some standard experiences. The McDonald's soft serve always broken. Like, you know what I mean? Like your mama saying, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm not one of your little friends. It doesn't matter if you were in a big city, if you were in a small town, you know, and you like understand that experience, right?
Yeah.
I
And
think
we can also tell when it's being faked on screen, I think.
yes. And that's the question that I have, right? So it's about how do you thread that needle of making a film that is universally viable or intriguing, but also like really speaks to that Black experience and those like cultural touchstones that we have, you know? It's something that I think in a funny way, like other cultures don't deal with. You know, you see a mainstream white film and everyone's just supposed to identify and empathize with those characters. You see, you know, and maybe in like foreign language films, but like if I watch a French New Wave film, I'm not like, oh, I have no idea what they're going through. You know what I mean? And so it feels like it's always a conversation with Black folks and Black film that it maybe is unfair to have because we don't have it with other cultures as much. But what do you think about that? Like that ability to kind of thread that needle, and do you have any films that you think do that very well?
I just think for us, we feel it on a level, especially as creatives, people who are behind the scenes, writing, producing, directing. I think off top, we just feel this, one, the pressure, because like you said, when you look at certain films, you just like, oh, it is what it is. You kind of don't think that way. But when it comes to us, I think we are so just hyper aware of how we are portrayed on a daily basis, whether how we're portrayed in the media versus how a non-Black person is portrayed in our day-to-day lives, in the workforce with microaggressions and everything. And we are just so hyper aware of everything. And I think when it comes to wanting to create film, whether it be major film or indie, there's just this intention of wanting to make sure that we honor our people. I mean, whether the role is controversial, it don't always have to be like cookie cutter and perfect, but even the character could be very controversial in essence. We want to show different angles of the Black experience and Black people. We are just not like one size fit all. We are all multifaceted. We come from different backgrounds and things, and we just want to accurately portray that and show different sides of us outside of the societal stereotypical perception. Like one of my favorite characters is not necessarily, you know, film wise, but television wise. I really, really love Annalise Keating, and I love how complex she is as a character and how Viola Davis just completely put her foot in that role and just showing the different facets of Annalise. Yeah, she's an incredible lawyer. She's an incredible professor. She's also complex as hell. She has a lot of skeletons, a lot of demons that she battles with on a day-to-day basis. And I just think like roles like that, I would love to see more like roles like that in film and movies to show different components of us. And to also tap back into that question of, you said keeping it intentional, but also thinking about like a more broader scope. Black Panther. I mean, there's still a lot of conversations about the film now, about moments like, I remember having a conversation on my podcast where we talked about Black Panther, and one of my guests felt like the film was incredible, yes, but they were still kind of like little irritated with the presence of Ross, because they always feel like when it comes to a Black film, why can't it just all be Black? And why do we need to have like this quote unquote white savior to help move the film? And I guess they were talking about I mean, everybody should have seen Black Panther by now. So there was a moment where everybody was battling. T'Challa was alive, challenging Killmonger. And so Shuri and Nakia and Ross were sneaking back into the labs. And while Nakia and Shuri were out fighting, Ross was like in control to like destroy all of the other Quinjets and whatnot. And my guess was like, couldn't we have had somebody else in that role? Did it necessarily have to be Ross? Like, yes, thank you. He's an ally to Wakanda, and he served that role until like the end of the movie, which was great. But why can't there always be, you know, an all Black cast with Black people in that position? Like they said, it could have been somebody else, or maybe another person of color who could have been in that role and challenged T'Challa in what was that, Korea, when Killmonger ambushed them and stole Claw. So yeah, it's definitely like an ongoing conversation of how can we adequately represent our stories and who we want to be in place to, you know, portray that. So I think Black Panther was like a good example of that too.
I kind of think that Moonlight did that in a way that like it is very rare. I think it's rare that a movie like Moonlight would pop off the way that it did, not just because it's, you know, about a Black gay man, but just because it's so small and it's so intimate and it's so specific. You know, it's based on a play, but so many people watched it and really, really responded to it. And I think a lot of that is, you know, to speak to your point about having to insert a white person, you know, Moonlight doesn't really have that, and it was still able to get to that universality without like having like an entry point for white people. I think it's possible to have that. Like for example, like I think it was possible to make Hidden Figures without the scene where Kevin Costner like knocks the bathroom sign. Like there's
which actually, you know, never happened, and so it also gives you that like, oh, we're not. I feel like, sorry to cut you off, but I feel like that is a problem of empathy in white Americans, right? They're not able, and they're never taught or forced to really feel empathy outside of themselves, right? And so growing up as Black Americans, most of the media that we consume does not include us, does not represent us, or does not represent us accurately. And so we find those characters that we empathize with and we attach. The Goofy movie, for me, like, I know it's problematic, but Pocahontas and I go together, okay? Like, her father said these white men are dangerous. I said, noted. Like, I don't look like Pocahontas. I'm not Native, though, as you know, a Black person, there's some Native in my family somewhere, I've been told. But that's not my experience, right? But like, because I didn't have any other options, I've learned to find and empathize and see myself in people that don't look like me. And I don't think that that's ever been expected of white audiences. And then when there are things like Black Panther where they could have that, they give them an out with Ross, or you know, and they didn't do that with Moonlight, which I think Barry Jenkins has this wonderful quote where he says, with Moonlight, we were telling a story that was so specific, and in that specificity, you've got to the universal experience, because I may not be a Black gay man from Miami and impoverished with a addict mother, but I've known love, I've known shame, I've known not fitting in, and I can kind of use those experiences to really understand what these characters are going through. So yeah, sorry to cut you off, Renee. But I feel like that empathy gap is
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I notice this sometimes when I'm reviewing Black films, when I'm trying to talk to them with other critics, there's this sense of disinterest to a lot of things, you know, especially, I don't know, like somebody would just be like, oh, this so and so movie is really generic. Like I remember having a conversation about Miss Juneteenth after I saw it at Sundance, and just people just thinking about it as like this like regular like coming of age movie, and it was just like all the other ones, and it's just like I don't understand how you would not see everything that is going on here. And but it is like it seems to be very hard for non-Black audiences, not just white people, to see like everything that's going on, like the specificity of a Black story and the differences between like when it's just Black people and when it's something else.
Yeah.
I've always been curious because like Jordan, you say you're a critic, and the conversations you have with non-Black critics about Black art, because I know that was a topic of discussion maybe a couple years back with like Us, and the way that Black critics were talking about Us and dissected it, and then non-Black critics were probably like, don't really get it, or this and that, or they have a very, well, not all of them, but one track mind about a certain thing. Like what is like that constant like conversation between you and other critics when it comes to talking about Black films? Like, do you feel like, wow, this was the point and you completely missed it? Or
I mean, there are like I'm kind of a person who doesn't really like to like fight like non-Black critics on these things. Like I'll see what they say and I'll just be like, well, this isn't really thought through, and then I'll say what I need to say, and I'll try to be as polite about it as possible. But I see some, and you kind of get like a sense of how people are going to react to certain things. In terms of Us, it was interesting because it seemed to confuse a lot of people that it wasn't that it was a story but an all-Black family that was not about race, and it just doesn't. It just seemed like I don't understand why people kept on trying to make it about race when it wasn't. It was about like economic position. It was about class.
Yeah.
It was about poverty. And it's just you can't, but people just couldn't get past what they wanted it to be about. I mean, yeah. I mean, and then there's like the flip side of that, where there's like a Black movie that I absolutely hate and that I think is really inauthentic, and white people just like really stomp for it, like Waves.
What do you hate? What do you hate?
Oh, well, I hate Waves. I hate Queen and I hate Queen and Slim.
I was gonna use Queen and Slim.
I never watched it, and I'm like, I'm okay.
That was the next question. Go for it.
It's one of the most dishonest movies I have ever seen. It's just nothing about it is true. There is absolutely no truth in it. And like as a Southern person, I was particularly pissed off at like, so I mean, spoilers for Queen and Slim. You know, they're trying to go to Cuba, which is weird because they were in the Midwest and they could have easily gone to Canada, but whatever. So they're going to Cuba. They're trying to like escape. And then they meet up with this man, you know, like a grill, like a nice, like Southern dude. And he's, you know, he's like smoking weed. He kind of looks like Bun B. And that, which I mean, makes sense because like when they're in the car, you hear the song Still Tippin'. And I remember being in the theater and thinking, I have always wanted to hear Still Tippin' in a movie. And I'm so mad that it's this one, because as soon as it plays, that man, the coolest dude in the movie, the dude who is just high listening to Mike, he betrays them. He's the one that betrays them to the cops. Literally the most like hood, like down to earth person is the person that turns them in. And it just made me so mad. They
lost me when they were getting the car fixed. And this is just spoilers of Queen and Slim, but don't spoil it. If you haven't seen it, good job. And if you have, you know, okay. But they're going to get their car fixed. They're on the run, right? And they become these kind of like cult figures apparently for this completely. I don't even understand how this happened. You know, they kill a cop. And then they see this young boy, and the old black man who's fixing their car has a son, and the son is talking to them, and they all know who they are, and you know they're helping them because they're these cult figures or whatever. And then the son goes to a Black Lives Matter type protest, and then shoots up, like it becomes a mass shooter. And we don't do that.
He went to a Black Lives Matter protest and shot it.
He was shooting the cops, or he was shooting white people.
It's so weird too, because
it makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense. So this kid, he like wants to be a hero or whatever, and he walks up and he's got a gun and he shows up at the protest, and there's a black cop that's just like trying to protect him. It was so weird. The black cop was just
he shoots a black cop.
Like the thing is that the black cop is like, hey, I understand, but you shouldn't be here. Please leave. And then he won't leave. And it's this weird thing where like this cop is actually trying to protect him, which a cop would not do. It doesn't matter if it's a black cop. A cop would not do that. And then like, he shoots, and then this kid gets shot. Like this kid gets murdered. And while this kid is getting murdered, Queen and Slim are fucking in the car. And it's intercut. The whole thing is intercut with the sex in the car. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen. I hate it so much.
It's explained like he was inspired by them, and that juxtaposition and that idea of like it's totally it's a white person's fever dream that black people want to get revenge and will treat, are these just like, we just want to be left alone, really. Like, and so like, if you have this like black boy who's saying like, I want to fight and I want to like, he wants to fight for equality. He wants to fight for freedom. Why would he then go out of his way to shoot a black cop and then just perpetrate all of the things that he says he's fighting against?
Because
there's cuts of them having sex, like
there's cuts
to them having sex, like even just like on that level, it's like the only thing that people have compared it to is like there's a scene in Munich that is similar, but it's like right, but that is Munich. This is Queen and Slim. Like this didn't need to be here, and it was so I don't know. It was one of those things that I noticed a lot in Black criticism, which is that like there were a lot of movies that we did not have access to because we weren't invited to the festivals. We weren't respected. Like I managed to start at around the time where everybody decided that inclusion was super important, but like, they didn't. And so there have been all these Black movies. Like when we say we've never had this, there have been all these Black movies that we actually have had, but we haven't gotten to see them because we didn't know that they existed. And all of the white people who go to these film festivals see these Black movies, and if they're not impressed enough, those movies disappear, then we never hear about them again. And so when Queen and Slim came out, it was really interesting because they were like, "Oh, it's the only Black Bonnie and Clyde story," and I actually dispute that. There's a 70s one called Thomason and Bushrod that I watched recently that is so much better than Queen and Slim in almost every way. It's actually, and I didn't watch it until after I saw Queen and Slim. I just turned on the Criterion channel and it was there, and it's just like, great, but how many people don't have the Criterion channel? Like, how many people don't know this movie exists? Like,
that was meant for you to see. That was meant for you to see. Like, let's show you better. Let's show you better. Because at the time when the film was coming out, you know how you could look at certain films. I'm like, oh, that's good. That's great for them. I don't know if I'm gonna see it. And then you see like the reactions. I was seeing so much about the dude with the grills betraying them and this and that. But I don't know. I just didn't. And I'm not knocking like Lena Waithe or anything, but sometimes you just.
Oh, because
I get it. Them.
Them. She doesn't make, she makes black content for white audiences, and that is fine. That is her bag.
That's her.
But
yeah, I mean
that's what she's doing. That's what she's doing, and we need to like be very open and honest about that. Like,
right. And also,
she's not making content for us.
We're not her. Yeah.
But like, and while something like that, like Queen and Slim gets all of this attention, there are other things. Like, my favorite thing to do as a critic is talk about something that no one else is talking about, because that's like, if I don't really like to talk about popular things. I will do it for money, but like, that's not like my favorite thing to do. My favorite thing to do is talk about like lesser known things, like the show P-Valley on Stars, which I actually think is maybe one of the best black shows. Like, it reminded me that there weren't a ton of black 1 hour dramas for a really long time. And then of course we got like a bunch kind of like all in succession, where it was like Greenleaf and Queen Sugar and Empire and Power and stuff like that. But P-Valley is maybe the only one that's like specifically about women and set in the South, and specifically about poor people. And so like, specifically like as somebody who like grew up poor in Georgia, watching P-Valley is like huge. Like, it takes place in Mississippi. Like, it's so good. And I wish that was the kind of thing that we'd be talking more about, because it's an incredible show. I don't know if y'all watched it, but it's great.
I'm trying to get into it. I think I watched the first episode, and so I'm trying to like get more. I know I'm sold on Uncle Clifford. Like, I'm good on that. Like, he's amazing. And Loretta Devine's character, his grandmother, those two alone, I'm like, okay, I'm digging them too. Those two are hilarious. And of course, Mercedes. I think the topic of conversation is when obviously she whooped her mama. So I'm like, I'm into that episode.
Beautiful episode, beautiful scene. Like, it's one of the shows that I turn it on and I'm just like, this is black. Like, there's absolute everything about it is black. Like, even the white girl in it is like the exact kind of white girl that you would see in that group of friends, in that situation. Like, I saw that white girl, I was like, I know this white girl, you know, like.
Yeah. That's how I feel about the movie Blind Spotting. And, you know, I lived in the Bay Area for a decade. I have family from the Bay Area. That movie is so Oakland in so many ways, and it's very truthful. And then you have Rafael Castell's character, who is Miles, who's this like the white friend who is Oakland, just as Oakland as his black best friend. But like, there's this juxtaposition, right? The black best friend is on parole and cannot, and it's very like honest about like, he is not going back to jail. He's not putting himself in these positions. And he sees a black man get murdered while he's at work. And sorry for anyone who hasn't seen Blind Spotting, but make sure that you see it, because the TV show is coming up soon and I'm excited for that as well. But they go to this party and his white best friend gets into a fight and pulls out a gun, and he's like, what do you know what I mean? Like, you were putting me in this position that is like, you're not thinking all the way through, because yes, you're just as like, he wasn't like, we're not gonna, you know, challenge your cred, challenge like who you are and whether or not this is real for you, but this is real for you with completely different stakes than it's real for me. Right. And so I think that like, we have films that are having these conversations, that are having these, you know, our shows that are having these like stand-ins, that allow us to have this conversation, because at least for me, I grew up in California and Los Angeles, and you know, I spent 10 years in Oakland, but like, I've never lived in an all black space. I've always had to figure out ways in which I navigate, you know, more diverse mixed spaces, white spaces, living in Southern California, like Mexican, Hispanic, Latinx spaces. And so, you know, it's difficult to say that like you need an all Black cast or you need an all Black, creative team to make these stories be, qualify as like Black film, because there are a lot of experiences in which that's just not the truth. Like I couldn't make a film of my life and it be an all Black film.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be truthful. So I do wonder about that. Like, and how you guys see those conversations between the Black experience, the Black American experience, and who's doing it well and who's doing it poorly, I guess. Like,
yeah, I mean, to the point about like authenticity. I mean, if you tell a story that's specifically authentic to you, it will work. Like, and it's pandering that kind of gets you in trouble. I think a lot about the first time I watched Shatara Michelle Ford's recent film Test Pattern, which I am obsessed with, and I am obsessed with her, and it's just like fantastic. And it's just like, it's about a Black woman who is in a relationship with a white man, and she's dealing with being sexually assaulted by another white man. And it's like the whole kind of process like makes her like reconsider the power dynamics within her own relationship. Like, what does it mean to be with a white man? And, can I trust him? Does he understand me? Is he going to listen? Like, all of those things were like I'm with a white man. And so when I watch stuff like that, I'm just like, okay, this is something, because it's not just like, oh, we're just like multicultural and it's all going to be okay, like rainbow, like swirl YouTube kind of shit. It's like, let's actually interrogate the power dynamics of being in a relationship with a white man, like the good and the bad of that. It's really hard to do well, and Shatara does it amazingly. So
you're just dropping all of these gems. I'm gonna need you to like give us a list of like what we need to be watching and where we can find them, because I'm like, wait, hold up, I don't know this one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have plenty of lists. It's my favorite thing to do. Like, whenever I go to a film festival, I try to watch as many like Black films as I can find, or as many like small films made by women. And it's been really great for me. I mean, that's how I found Miss Juneteenth. And then I was able to interview the director last year, Channing Peoples, and she's fantastic. Yeah.
I know for me, I have a journalism background, but I very much have this yearning to get into spaces like this to write for. Like, I would love to write for television. I would love to do short films. And I'm in this space right now where I have all these ideas and I'm trying to like pull them out of me and not worry about being so perfect and the anxiety of everything. So, and I think one of the things that I'm learning from talking to other storytellers or people who have directed is to be true, let the story flow. All I have to do is just write what my characters are saying. If they're speaking to me, let them speak. Let it be authentic. Don't try to manipulate or try to gatekeep. Just let things flow as they are and be authentic. Because for me, and I know everybody can agree with this, you gravitate to what's truly authentic. It's a heart-to-heart thing. And I remember one time I tweeted Amanda Seales about, oh, I want to write this short story, because she did like this really fun web series called Get Your Life. And I thought it was so fun and everything. And I had tweeted her saying that, well, I'm trying to write something, but I feel so awkward and this and that. And she was like, take what's true in essence of you and write that. Because you can't fake it on the page. You can't fake it because somebody's going to clock it one way or the other. So if you be truly yourself and write from a perspective that isn't necessarily talked about a lot, but you can put your own experience and your own spin. Like for me, like when I was in college, like YouTube was such a special place, like compared to what it is now. It's like so influencer full and everything. But there was a component at a certain time where you can find like interesting short stories. Like for me, when I think about college, I think about The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl.
Black Girl.
Issa Rae. Like, I have such a soft spot in my heart for Issa Rae, and I look up to her, and I love who she is as a storyteller. So when Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl came out and I watched that, I'm like, first of all, I have never seen this before. How amazing to see a Black girl who is awkward and how she navigates from day to day. And I'm like, oh crap, I can relate to that. But on the flip side of that, on Issa's end, that was her story. That's how she identified herself. That's how she walked from day to day. And so she told her truth, and look at what it blossomed to. It blossomed to Insecure, and how she was able to, on a different scope, kind of keep that thread of Misadventures of Awkward Girl, but evolve it to a girl who living in California, who is trying to find her footing in life, in a relationship that ain't all that, you know, has her girlfriends, but it resonates so deeply with everyone. So it goes back to what we said in the beginning of our conversation, intention. Like, what is your intention? And letting authenticity really be the author of what you're trying to do. So I'm a big Issa Rae fan. I'm actually watching one of her classes about storytelling and writing, so I can adopt that when I write my film. So pray for me if, you know, I'm trying to get that out of me right now. It's a process. It is interesting, because the biggest challenge in that is just be honest in the moment. And like somebody told me, just write, just let the characters talk. Your job is write what they say.
Yeah. I think with Issa Rae too, it's a really great case study. I mean, if you look, there's no real point in comparing, but if we look at like her trajectory of her career versus Lena Waithe's trajectory of her career, and the differences in the choices that they made, I think that with Issa Rae in particular, she's always had a vision of, you know, she wanted to, like, she could have created Insecure and not played the main character. They could have like cast someone else, but she wanted that character to be, you know, she had a very clear vision of who that character was and what that character should be. She like is very intentional about having darker skinned actresses in those roles.
Yeah.
There are conversations that are had in like a lot of the episodes of Insecure that, like, it feels like, you know, you could see her scrolling through Twitter and being like, oh wait, that's something, right? And so I think one of the things, and you know, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to know from you both is, who do you think is making that kind of content right now that is very authentic, that you would say, when I think of Black film and when I think of Black filmmakers, I think of this person who's doing it kind of in the what you would consider the right way?
Do you want like a more well-known person, like, you know, someone who's doing things that we can all watch?
No.
Okay.
Just give us what speaks to you.
Well, I want to shout out Shatara again, because Shatara Michelle Ford, an incredible filmmaker, and I can't wait to see what she makes next after Test Pattern. Also, there's Jatavia Gary, who made a short, not like a short film, but not like a feature film, kind of like somewhere in the middle, called The Giverny Document, that was at Black Star. And it's her work, her short work is really, really good. Trying to think, there are other people that I was thinking, but I'll just wait. Anyway, go on, Ashley.
There's so many filmmakers I want to get into as far as what they're doing. I guess for me, I'm so nostalgic. I like to go back to like the first film that really impacted me, and usually a lot of people say, oh, that film is interesting. I said, but I love the film, even though it was different. Maybe it just kind of shows like who I was when I was a younger kid and type of films that I was watching. But when I think of a filmmaker, And I think about how true she was and how complex she was in crafting this story, not only in writing it, but also in the way it was shot. And she directed it. I absolutely love from the bottom of my heart. I love Casey Lemon so much. And she created and wrote Eve's Bayou, which is one of my most favorite films. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's controversial," and that scene. I'm like, I know that scene, but as a whole, with the story she told around memory and from the perspective of Eve Baptiste being this young girl and talking through like one of the most turbulent summers of her life and the death of her father, and just the nuances of those characters and the different portrayals of Black women. Like, one perspective, you have the housewife played by Lynn Whitfield. She played Roz Baptiste. And then on the other perspective, you had the aunt played by Debbie Morgan Moselle, who I absolutely adore in that role. She was incredible. And then you have the late, great Diane Carroll. Whoever would thought, as beautiful and glamorous she was, you think about when she played Dominique Devereaux in Dynasty and Whitley Gilbert's mom in A Different World, to see her completely like in this face painting, playing this voodoo lady and telling people's fortunes. And this something just so opposite of what you think she should play as a role, but yet she challenged you in that. I love that film so much. And that film especially inspired me to want to tell stories, for sure, even the complex ones. And when I did have the pleasure to interview Casey Lemons, and I was like completely gushing throughout the whole conversation, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm really talking to one of like my sheroes who picked up the pen and did her thing. And I asked about that scene, and the controversial scene that everybody else knows around that film is between Samuel Jackson and Morgan Good. And I think she was 13 or 14 around that time, where they had to kiss because there was like this blurred line. There was like there was like this blurred line between father and daughter that happened because things were just so chaotic. And I remember asking that question about people's reactions around that scene. And she said, I don't really necessarily see that scene as controversial. It kind of it's a part of the story. And what happens when you put characters in very trying situations and explode the moment? What happens when you do that? So it was an awesome conversation, and made me think about how can I create challenging, complex characters and storylines and just expand it in a way. So for me, long story, I'm sorry, but Casey Lemons for me, for sure.
I mean, she's always been great. She's just like really incredible. I'm just gonna I feel like I want to shout out like a few people, if that's okay, like newer films. So Numa Perrier's Jezebel, which is about a Black cam girl, is like really, really, really fascinating work that people should watch. And if you're looking for something just like a little weird, Mati Diop's Atlantics is also just like so mesmerizing and interesting. And those are both on Netflix. I also really like the work of Stella Maggie, who she's been doing like a bunch of films, but I actually really like the film that she did with Issa Rae, The Photograph, which reminded me a lot of kind of like the Black romance films from the 90s, like Love Jones and stuff like that. And I would love to see some more of those. And I met her and she's lovely and I really support her work. And of course, like Dee Reese, who I am so into, and I'm so worried because the last movie that she made with like Anne Hathaway wasn't good, and I want to make sure that she makes another movie, because like, okay, whatever, like she made Pariah, like, which is like really great. She made Mudbound, which is so fascinating, and then she made one of my personal favorite films, Bessie, which is just I love Bessie so much. I feel like Bessie does not get the credit that it deserves for like not only being a good biopic, but being gay as hell and not being like weird or kind of skirting around it. It's like, it's a movie where women are attracted to women And it's so rare to see that, especially like for Black women, just them being able to, you know, just like be bisexual, be sexual at all, really. So yeah, I wanted to shout her out. I love Dee Reese so much.
And I'm gonna go with I think two pretty good and newer things. Channing Godfrey Peoples' Miss Juneteenth. We actually showed that film at last year's Juneteenth Cinema Celebration, and I think that it is just a really beautiful, really smart film. Like it reminded me when we were watching it about why I love indie filmmaking and why it's so important to have Black women in those positions, because there's just like choices that are made in that film that I could not see anyone else making. And it's just really smart and layered. And then this is a little bit more mainstream, but George C. Wolfe, who directed Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, just from a standpoint of, and just so you guys know, like the pandemic has been rough on my film watching. You would think that I would be like just downing, just like inhaling movies, but I don't have it. I'm like, let's watch Star Trek for the 80th time and like not think.
That's real.
See, now you sound like my fiance. He always wants to watch Star Trek.
You know what? When in doubt, watch Voyager. But I was home and we were watching I was watching Ma Rainey's Black Bottom with my parents, and it was the first time in a long time that I like my film studies, my media major kicked in, and I would be pausing it like, do you see this shot? Do you see the lighting of this face? Do you see the way the camera's telling the story? And it was just beautiful. And you know, August Wilson play, wrote it, and so there's that level of just dialogue and, you know, meat to those monologues. But the choices that they made in the camera work was just beautiful. If you haven't seen it, it's on HBO. Go watch it. It's not an easy film. It's Chadwick Boseman's last film as well, so that's, you know, difficult. Yeah. But there will be moments in which you're just stunned. I just forgot his name, but he was also in Crooklyn. Alan Turkle? No. Anyway, he has a monologue in it that is just there's just performance. There's acting.
Oh, well, yeah. It's like anything. I mean, and Coleman Domingo's in there, and I love Coleman Domingo.
Coleman Domingo has this wonderful character. They're doing the work, and it's just really beautiful. We are out of time. But I don't know if we've answered the question of what makes a Black film, but we've got some amazing recs. We've gotten some really great discussion out of this. Let the people know where they can find you and what you're up to.
You can find me on Twitter at Judy Squirrels. You know, because I'm Jordan Searles, and my podcast is called Bad Romance. We talk about bad romantic movies. We've been doing it since 2017. We're so deep in it. And this month we're only doing Black movies. So we did Deliver Us from Evo. We did Breaking All the Rules. We were about to do How to Be a Player. So that's been really fun. And I have a show on Netflix's YouTube channel. It might be a little bit hard to find. It's called Black Film School, and it's me and director Kevin Wilson and programmer Sarah Ty Black, and we talk about Black film. And hopefully Netflix will give us more episodes. We'll see.
Hopefully that's dope. I just want to say thank you for having me on. This has been so much fun. It was such a pleasure to meet you, Jordan. It's such a pleasure to meet you, Robin. Thank you for creating a space like this that is so dope, and we can just have conversations like this. So if you guys want to follow me, I'm at Hey Ash Lemonade on Twitter. Like I said, I'll also create ashlemonade.com, which is my pop culture entertainment website. I am the host of Sweeting with Ash Lemonade podcast. New episodes come out every Friday. And I'm so excited because I have some really great guests that are coming on so far. And one of my future guests that I have slated is I have the lovely Kiami Daviel, who played Lavender in Matilda. She's going to be a guest, as well as I gushed. That was a sweet interview, and I can't wait for everybody to hear that. I also had Elise Neal and a couple incredible women.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I just had an episode that just came out, and I just want to say shout out to Peppermint Gaddy and Darling Nikki. We just had a really great conversation about Black womanhood and our evolution. And I created this podcast because I wanted to give space to Black and brown women so we can have real, authentic conversations, so we can be ourselves and just talk about the things that impact us, as well as talk about how they are impacting the culture through their work, through their art, through their careers, and their day-to-day lives. So it's something that I'm so proud of. I'm proud of this podcast. We're about to hit 1 year on July the 10th, which blows my mind. To start a podcast in the middle of the craziness of the pandemic last year and everything that I went through and all the loss that I endured, this has definitely been a blessing in disguise. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you both so much for your insight and taking the time. And thanks everyone who was watching and making this a wonderful Juneteenth Cinema Celebration. We will be back next year with more celebration of Black American film. I want to finally thank Eliana, who came up with this idea and has always been just like a wonderful partner, and Nicole Hill at Queer Specimen. I said, can we watch the movie through Discord? And they said, of course, and did everything that needed to be done, and it was wonderful. So they put the website together, they did, the whole thing, and would not have been such a success without them. So thank you guys again. And you can find me at blackgirlscreate.org. Join our community if you want to connect with other creators who are starting their journeys and working on really fun things. We try to just really help cultivate and encourage Black women in particular, Black folks in general, people of color in general, to, do the thing, write the story, tell the story, let your character speak, cook the food, make the clothes, whatever you want to do that's creative. We want to support you, gas you up, and let people know about the wonderful things that people do. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you next year. Well, actually, we have a digital convention coming up in October, and so you will get more information about that on our website, blackgirlscreate.org. All right. Thank you both so much for joining. Appreciate you guys.
Bye, queens.
Bye.